All right. Once again, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Laura Stoltenberg to do some introduction.
Thanks, Kim. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. Depending on where you are, it's a beautiful fall morning in Aberdeen, so I hope you're getting the same. But appreciate you joining us and taking a little time in October here for these National Disability Employment Awareness Month events. We appreciate your time and know it's valuable. So again, this is one of a lot of events happening across the state, and so feel free to check the Department of Human Services website if you want to see what else is happening, something else that might be happening near you. Again, my name's Laura Stoltenberg. I'm the district supervisor with vocational rehabilitation and in Aberdeen and Pierre offices. But just want to share a couple of opening comments with you all this morning. Today's topic will be fairly interactive, but if you have questions for our presenters or on some of those topics, feel free to use the chat. But also feel free, if you're brave, to just open up your mic and ask a question so that we can have that conversation. But to get to the reason why we're here today, again, we are recognizing National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which is celebrated every year throughout October. And what National Disability Employment Awareness Month is it recognizes those contributions of workers with disabilities. NDEAM events hope to provide education about that value of creating an inclusive workforce, including individuals with disabilities. And then also ensuring America's workplaces continue to have and accommodate people with disabilities, because that is important for both workers, but also employers in that market pool of applicants. So this year's 2022 NDEAM event is disability, part of the equity inclusion, or excuse me, part of the equity equation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kim Ludwig, one of our presenters today, to share a few things and get us started. Thanks, Kim.
Great. Thanks, Laura. So again, welcome to this morning's training, which is one of the part of the National Disability Employment Awareness Month training series that Aberdeen and Pierre are hosting. The events are being sponsored, as you can see on the slide there. Our sponsors are the South Dakota Department of Human Services, the Board of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Board of Service to the Blind and Visually Impaired, and the Statewide Independent Living Council. Today's training is going to focus on examining disability stereotypes, and the trainers include myself, Audra Cardwell, and Lindsay Marriott. So they probably waved on the screen. So I am with the South Dakota Division of Rehabilitation Services, and both Lindsay and Audra are with the Black Hills Special Services Cooperative, in which they are in the local Aberdeen and Pierre offices, respectively. Before we get started, I just want to quickly go over a couple housekeeping items. There is closed captioning available on the bottom of the screen. As you can see, it appears automatically. If you need a certificate of attendance, there is going to be an evaluation link that Laura will put in the chat box towards the end of the training. Also, the same form can be used to provide feedback on the training today. It will be greatly appreciated because it is used for future trainings. Also, today's training is going to be recorded. We'd love to hear you. We'd love to hear from you during the training. So if you have any comments or questions, please use the chat box feature that is located on your control panel. Also, if you have any technical difficulties, please message me or Laura Stoltenberg directly using the chat box. So with that, let's get started with our training. So Lindsay, I am going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Kim. Today's training is intended for general educational purposes only. We will be examining the stereotypes that are commonly associated with certain disabilities and our emotional reactions to them. Also, we will explore how an individual's prior perception of a disability may keep successful applicants with disabilities from being hired. This training will be interactive and will consist of a couple breakout group activities. We're gonna let
Yeah.
Kim display our activity for you guys.
Yep, just momentarily, so just bear with me here. All right.
All right, so now we are going to do a short activity in which all of you will have an opportunity to participate in. On the screen, Kim has displayed 4 disabilities for you viewing, which are anxiety disorder, traumatic brain injury, cerebral palsy, and clinical depression. We will ask for each of you to pick from these 4 disabilities by selecting one disability that you would have, which is the reason for the yes on the side of the table. And then choose one disability you would not want to have. Again, this is the reason for the no on the side of the table. Keep in mind, there is no right or wrong decision with this activity. We are now going to have all of you go into breakout rooms to discuss with one another about the reasons why you selected the disability that you'd have. You're going to have about 10 minutes to discuss this, and we will come back together as a large group to share responses. Before going into the breakout groups, let's review a couple of things. Once you get into your groups, please identify someone to take notes and be the spokesperson for your group, as they'll also speak on behalf of the group once we come back together. Also, you're going to watch the screens for which breakout group you are in that you're assigned to. Does anyone have any questions before we do that?
And also I did put in the group activity and the for disabilities in the chat box as well. So any questions? So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to start assigning the breakout groups. So again, just focus on the group number on the screen, and I'm going to pause the recording at this point, and then I will start the recording again once we come back together as a large group. So just give me a couple seconds here and welcome back, people. Hopefully there was great discussions within the groups. We'll just give it a couple more seconds, just to make sure everybody gets back together as a large group. Hey. All right, I think for the most part, we have everyone back together, large group, Lindsay. So if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so I'm gonna call on each group individually, and I'm gonna ask for you guys to tell me in 1 to 2 word responses why somebody would have said yes to the disabilities that you guys chose. So let's start with group 3. Who is our spokesperson for group 3?
I don't know if I remembered the numbers. Was that my group? I apologize. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 2 words, that's tough. So we all picked anxiety, which was a theme in our group, honestly, of the yes, we would prefer, if you will, to have that. A couple of the reasons that we had consensus on was that it might be more manageable. We can learn our triggers, and that it could be maybe considered more normal in terms of the type of disability.
All right, Thanks, Laura.
Say, Lindsay, do you
Yeah.
mind if I just ask Laura and her group, just to expand on the normal component? Could you just explain that more?
Well, we all maybe agreed, if you will, that everybody we feel has a little bit of anxiety because of what life throws at you. You know, things constantly change. There's constantly things you have to work through, and that's different in terms of how people react to those things. And so for some people, that may be, you know, a certain level of anxiety that those typical life events are creating and that we're working through. So it seemed more normal in that regard, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, no, thank you for explaining that more. All right,
Wonderful.
Lindsay.
All right, thank you. Let's go with group 1. Who is our spokesperson for group 1?
I took the notes here, so I guess I can be the spokesperson.
All right, thanks, Jeremy.
All right, so the majority of our group picked anxiety as well, and it almost for similar reasons. Part of it was a lot of us, it turns out a lot of us in our group already have anxiety disorders. And so the familiarity and you know, also what Laura's group had said, you know, more manageable, easier to treat with medication. I actually said clinical depression because in my experience with anxiety disorder, there's often a comorbidity with depression, you know, so it comes along with it. And so in my mind, that would be like, one less thing to treat, I guess, if you just quote unquote just had the clinical depression, you know, without the anxiety. But for similar reasons, you know, can be treated with meds. It's more familiar, I guess, and maybe easier for people to understand.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Let Kim catch up here a second. All right, group 2. Who is our spokesperson?
Hi, I'm Ashley. I was our spokesperson for group 2. We had 2 of us that said anxiety would be our one that we would choose just because it's a little less daunting, we felt like, than the others. And then we had one participant that said cerebral palsy as their yes, because individuals they've seen have just always seem more joyful with things and in life in general.
All right, thank you, Ashley. And our last group, number 4. Do we know who our spokesperson was for number 4? Who was in group 4?
Or even anyone from group number 4.
I can take that. The consensus was that it was all the way across the board. It was interesting because each one of us had a different selection as to why. Anxiety, again, I would agree with much of the group that it's one of those things that is managed. Probably a lot of people deal with it in society. One of our individuals has dealt with a TBI and has overcome a lot of those issues. However, modifies lifestyles that don't seem to overly impact that person, you know, a great deal. Life goes on. CP, we agree that pretty functional. There's a lot of adjustments in society that have helped those individuals cope with their disabilities, and a lot of assistive equipment and living arrangements that help them prosper. And then the clinical depression, the challenges that come with that are a little bit more diverse. I think they impact people much like anxiety disorder a lot. A lot of people are dealing with some level of depression. but a little bit more debilitating sometimes than the other three, I think, depending on the level you deal with. And then one just chose not to have all four at all, which, but I think it was interesting to see that there was multiple selections that we didn't come to a true consensus, but we could see how there are benefits to having one over the other, when you really looked at all of them. So we didn't narrow one down really.
That is perfectly okay. Thank you, Brad, for sharing that from your group. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Audra Cardwell.
Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you, everybody, for those responses. At this point, we're all going to go back into our breakout rooms. There are 4 groups, so please know which one that you're in. We're going to give you 10 minutes again to discuss the reasons why you chose not to have a particular disability. Please be respectful and open with one another. When we come back together as a large group, your original spokesperson will share responses with everyone. So please make sure you're taking notes if you are that person.
Kim, I'm sorry, none of my stuff wanted to work. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Sorry, my screen was flipping out there for a second. Welcome back, everybody.
Say, Audra, just maybe couple more seconds. We've still got people coming back together. Okay, I think for the most part, Audra, everyone is back together. They might just be muting themselves, but take it away.
Perfect. Welcome back. One thing that I will say that this always makes me think about the things that I take for granted. I will put that out there. We're going to direct you back to the table on the screen, and we're going to discuss the no responses for each of these disabilities. We were talking about the disability that you would least want to have. So let's go with group number 4. What did you guys select and why?
So we selected TBI. The majority of the group, there were a couple that chose something a little bit different, but the consensus was the TBI. Just the negative impact of the unknown, the impact of the potential that there could be more to come in their life, depending on how extensive the injury was, but also the feeling that it's out of their control. The brain impacts so much of the human body, from emotion to physical disabilities, and depending on where the injury occurs in the brain, it really depends on how disabled you will be and how that will impact your ability to function in your world. So that was the selection that we had.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let's go with group number 2.
I guess we kind of did a little bit out of each category, but as far as TBIs go, our biggest thing was there's a lack of treatment, especially in our area. And so you might have to travel long distances to get the treatment that you need. And also insurance has a big hand in that you might not get to go to the facility that you want to go to due to insurance limitations. And we have some individuals with personal experience and just seeing how they try to do things that they did before, but they can't do it at the same level anymore, and how that's frustrating for them. and for their family to see too.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley. Let's go with group number 1.
I think that was,
Anybody?
yes, I'm sorry. Okay, so we also pretty much had the consensus that the TBI would be the worst. You can lose parts of your personality, like someone else said, the unpredictability of having it, and the fact that quite often, you're not born with the TBI, so it's something that you can remember that maybe the way that you were before, but then have difficulty expressing that person. But we talked a lot about how the brain is like our whole personality, and to live with a traumatic brain injury, there's just that fear of the unknown, is huge. Plus the fact that our brain is our entire being; it's who we are. Which of course all of these disorders can affect that. But I think with the TBI, it can affect it in some unique ways. We also did say that it would depend a lot on the severity, and for any of these disorders, the severity would play into it quite a bit.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And then we've got group number 3, Laura.
Yeah, we too had a lot of the same conversations. It sounds like the rest of the groups did. We a little bit teetered between TBI and CP, a little bit in that it depends as far as that severity. We talked about how both may be more physically debilitating, again, depending on where that injury or if there was other injuries with the TBI that occurred that may also produce more physical limitations. We talked about how both of them, there's a loss of control in some form or another, and that would be difficult. And then more so on the TBI side, as I think Jeremy just mentioned, it's an acquired disability, if you will, where again, you kind of know what it may have been like, and then there's something that has changed in many cases fairly drastically. And again, that kind of severity of what that would look like. But the other thing we talked a little bit about was the hiddenness, if you will, of the TBI versus something more physical, but also that it's maybe not as accepted as other disabilities over the years that have been around, if you will, maybe forever. So in terms of that definition, or what if you go up to someone and say, I have a TBI, they may again assume the worst versus having that physical appearance, or saying I have anxiety. It's more acceptable, if you will, across the norms of disabilities. So those would be the other things maybe to add to the group.
Thank you all so much for those responses. So if we look at
Say,
this,
Audra,
yeah,
aren't these interesting responses?
yeah,
The majority of your group selected traumatic brain injury as a disability not to have. So interesting. So carry on, Audra.
yeah, I fully agree with that. It's interesting to me. Kim, could you make that so that I can read all of the responses?
Yeah, you bet. You just want me to focus on.
If you go up to the yeses, actually, well, that'll work too. Yep, that works.
Yep. Can you read it?
Yeah, so if we're looking at these words, when we're talking about the yes category, we're looking at manageable, identify the triggers, the familiarity. I can't even talk today, I'm sorry. Easier to treat. Acceptable is a word that pops out a lot. Being able to overcome limitations. Again, acceptable diagnosis. Being able to function in society. Being given accommodations. Just all of these words, to be able to treat it, take medication for it, all of those words are sort of responses that are more positive and descriptive of things that people can do. And if we're looking at the no category, we're looking at negative impact, depending on others, not having control, changes in personality, hidden disabilities, acquired disabilities, not acceptable in society. And you could put that across the board for any disability. But I think these words are more negative, limiting, descriptive of things that people cannot do. So looking at it from that perspective, the things in the yes category compared to those in the no category, they're all the same disabilities, and the answers are right and wrong. And they're right because we could find someone with CP who's independent, able to work, coping well. Someone else with the same disability might be fully dependent on someone else, really frustrated, unhappy. And yes, we see most of the time that people are accepting of it, but maybe that's just what they show when they're in public too. The responses could be wrong because every disability or disabling condition, I should say, has a range for the individual. So there's individual differences and characteristics with a unique level for every disability. So just sort of looking at it from that perspective. But at this point, I will turn it back over to Lindsay.
Thanks, Audra. So the responses on the screen are not necessarily about people with disabilities, but are reactions to them. While it is not wrong to react to disabilities, the reactions can affect the decisions we make about people with disabilities. People make their decisions based on stereotypes. The difficulty comes when our stereotypes are based on limited knowledge and experiences, or when they become prejudgments. Prejudgments are beliefs that are not based on facts, but rather what we hold about people or places. So while there are many reasons why people react to disabilities, we will focus on 3 of them as follows. What we do not know about the disability, what we think we know about the disability, and pain. First, we will review what we do not know about the disability. With such a wide range of possible disabilities, it is impossible to be knowledgeable about every type of impairment. Much of what we think we know about disabilities may be years old or no longer up-to-date information. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, requires that when a disability is a valid issue to be considered in an employment situation, the employer is required to consider only the best available objective information to decide. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Kim.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. So next, we will review what we think we know about the disability. Oftentimes, we assume that one's experience with a person with a disability will give us great insight to what everyone who has that same disability is like. This attitude causes many companies to believe that there are jobs that are well suited to certain disabilities because a person with that disability once did well in a similar position. The fear is that rather than seeing an employee with a disability who is doing a good job as a good employee, the employer instead considers the person's success because of good match with their disability. The person doesn't get promoted and the next person with the same disability is put into a similar or same kind of job. Both actions are prohibited by the ADA. The ADA prohibits discrimination and promotion as well as job classification by disabilities and attitudes about disabilities. Lastly, we are going to review our pain reaction to disabilities. So anyone can react to being a person with a disability with sympathy and a feeling of pain. The problem comes when that pain gets between the employer and the person with the disability. While we may believe that the pain we feel when we meet a person with a disability is our perception of their pain, It is really about our own pain that we are feeling. Maybe we're feeling sorry for them or empathetic. This type of judgment can cause employers to place people with disabilities only in jobs where they cannot fail. These jobs are oftentimes low paying with little potential for promotional opportunities. Decisions made from these assumptions have a high risk of being in violation of the ADA. Ultimately, the key to success is to hold no higher standard for burden of proof for a person with disabilities than we would for anyone else. In other words, view the person foremost as a person, regardless of a disability or not. We all have our own limitations. So just keep that in mind as well. The ADA implications for this activity or today's training are enormous. The entire thrust of the ADA commitment is evaluating an individual with a disability based on what I just said, what that person can do rather than the stereotypes and assumptions about his or her disability. So we are going to start wrapping up today's training. But before we do that, I'm going to show a short 2-minute video. It's just really kind of a great wrap up to this video. So I'm going to just give me a moment here. I'm going to share my screen. Also, depending on your volume, might have to adjust your volume to hear the video. So just keep that in mind.
I'm going to read you a scripture from Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 through 31.
Video.
And it's a scripture about how God.
Okay.
I'm going to read you a scripture from Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 through 31.
It really wants us to hear that, apparently.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm often asked.
Can everybody hear that okay?
What is a
Okay.
really good job for someone who's blind? Or
For some reason, this video did not want to play today.
I'm often asked by employers, what is a really good job for someone who's blind? Or what would a good job be for someone who uses a wheelchair or is deaf? What are the good jobs for people with disabilities? And I've always wondered exactly what to say to the employer. But not too many years ago, I was giving a conference in a large city, and a gentleman who was an executive in human resources raised his hand. And he said, "Mr. Pimentel, I've been listening to you, and I want you to know that I, in my own company, have a job that would be perfect for someone in a wheelchair. What should I do?" And I thought a minute, and here's what I said. I said, "You've got a job that would be perfect for someone in a wheelchair." He said, "Yes." "They could do better?" "Yes." I said, "Great. Go to bed early tonight. Wake up early in the morning. Go to a wheelchair place and buy a wheelchair. Bring the chair into your company. Find out who is doing that job in your company. Put them in the wheelchair and watch production go up." He said, "What?" I said, "Well, if you've got a job which could be done better by someone in a wheelchair, by all means, put someone in a wheelchair and let them do it." He said, "I don't understand." And I said, "None of us understand. Here's what we need to know. There are no good jobs for people in wheelchairs, but there are people in wheelchairs that are good for jobs. There are no perfect jobs for people that are blind, but there are people who are blind who are doing a great job. And there's no jobs in your company, no jobs in your city, no jobs in your state for people with disabilities. But there are people with disabilities who should be considered for every job you have. You wouldn't hire someone just because of their race or gender or ethnicity. Don't hire someone just because of the disability. Hire them because they can do the job.
To me, that is a very powerful video. Does anyone have any thoughts on our training, even the video? Hi. So actually, Richard Pimentel is a well-known trainer throughout the nation. He's just a phenomenal presenter trainer. So, we are going to wrap up today's training, but I'm going to turn it back over to Laura just real quickly, just to talk about an upcoming training that will be taking place in the early part of November. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And hopefully if you saw in the chat, please take a quick minute and fill out that brief survey of your participation today. And if you would need a certificate of attendance or for certified rehab counselors, that information is on there too. So, and thanks for your feedback to the video. Looks like there was a lot of good feedback and agree. Feel free to share that message or share that out with your offices, whatever that might look like. Yes, so October obviously is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, but as a part of the Aberdeen and peer groups, we also are doing a second training, kind of spearheading off of some hot topics that we know we had asked some local HR groups about. And so November 4th, which is a Friday at 8:30, we too are going to do an hour-long training, and it will be with the Rocky Mountain ADA group. And so a gal will be coming and doing some training on the ADA and long COVID. As we know, that's kind of a newer topic that we are seeing people experience and experience kind of long lasting effects having had COVID. And so it's becoming a little bit more of a hot topic in the world of, ADA and reasonable accommodation. And what does that look like for employers? And so she's going to come and do a training on, some of that information, as well as some scenarios and talk through, things that we need to start being aware of and how to continue just to work with people for the good of that person and the good of your business. So feel free to join us. I'll send out that information again as it gets a little bit closer, but it was on the same flyer that you probably received to attend this training. So anybody have any final questions or thoughts? Otherwise, Kim put some of the contact information up here as well, it looks like.
Yeah, yep. If you are interested in contacting us to learn more about additional training opportunities, which are available at no cost, or even just to visit with us further, don't hesitate to reach out to the three of us. Otherwise, this concludes our training. Again, Laura put the evaluation link in the chat box if you need a certificate of attendance and or if you want to provide your feedback. With that, we will also send out a follow-up email with the evaluation link too, just ensure that you all received it, and then also with a recording of today's training. And then also we'll include the upcoming training in there as well. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.